We're here with another episode of College Coffee Talk. I hope you are enjoying a nice, tasty, hot beverage today. This morning, it's about 9:15, getting a little bit of a late jump for this week's episode of College Coffee Talk. College Coffee Talk, or CCT, as I like to call it, I and I alone, is all about your burning questions, all about your questions about college financial aid, college admissions, ACT or SAT prep, which is going to be the featured subject today because I just did a webinar last night with our tutor, Marissa, that I wanted to tell you about. Topic, which test is best, ACT versus SAT? But if you have any questions about any of that stuff, getting in, paying for college, scholarships, negotiating with colleges, the Patriots loss in the Super Bowl, which I'm just about, I'm not really over. Who am I kidding? Yeah, there's a lot of, it's very hard being a Boston/New England fan in Long Island, I have to tell you. I don't know if, I think I do know. I was going to say, I wasn't sure if New Yorkers hated Brady more than the entire sports fan base of the city of Philadelphia. I think they do, actually. So, anyway, that was heartbreaking. I'd rather talk about college stuff just to try to take my mind off it because it's kind of depressing that a guy my age would still care that much about sports, actually. So, all right. So if you have any questions or you just want to pop in and say hi, that's great too. Please like, comment, and share. And there is a way, I'm a little embarrassed. I'm not positive how you can be notified every time I come on, but there is a way to do that. So you can watch live, or you can watch in replay, and either way, whatever questions you have about college, pop them in comments, and I will come back and look at them. So let me see what is going on here. Jimmy says he loves the Patriots. No, you don't. Of course, I think they were the Boston Patriots when Jimmy and I were growing up, back in the Steve Grogan, Russ Francis era. So, welcome, James. I have to say one of the highlights of my what can only be described as illustrious Facebook Live career is when Jimmy, his twin sister Joanna, and his brother Kenny were all on the same broadcast about a month ago. That was, I don't know how to describe that. That was like my Super Bowl. Okay, so let me talk to you about what happened last night. So I did a webinar. We had a really busy week. I spoke, I guess, maybe 9 or 10 days ago, so technically last week. We did a pretty large webinar where we went over the predictions for class of 2019. And that was a little goofy because Pearl and I were in costumes, but it was fun. And at the end of that, we offered, I think, 14 or 15 complimentary college strategy session free consults. And those were snapped up. We had another 15 or 16 people say, hey, I tried to book, but I couldn't. So we've been talking to a lot of people, trying to juggle a lot of people. If you're watching and you're one of those people and you haven't heard from us yet, please remain calm. We are getting to you. It's just that we had a big influx. And then on top of that, I spoke in New York City a couple of nights ago, which was a lot of fun. Hosted by our client Karen Chapman at the Manhattan Youth Council. We had about, I'd say, 40 to 55-ish people there. And that was fun. We got a lot of questions, some of which I'll share today if we have time. And then last night on the old interwebs, on a webinar, I grilled our tutor Marissa on which test is best and a bunch of other questions that came up live in chat. That was great too. We had about 60-something people on, and I have I printed out. I'm showing you because I can barely read this, but I don't know how you could read. Went through a lot of questions, so I want to talk to you about that. So let me give a quick executive summary, the poor man's version, because I'm not nearly as knowledgeable as Marissa is about ACT and SAT prep. But she had some tips, a lot of which are common sense, and then we got into some more nuances which fleshed out the tips. And her 5 tips were, study early, study often, timing is everything, learn the strategy, and number 5 is know the material also. So study early. I asked her, what does that mean, like 5 a.m.? She didn't think that was funny at all. I, of course, did. Nothing new there. And sooner or later what happens is you run out of time. So there is some benefit to starting early, even if you haven't gotten all the content learned under your belt in high school. So Marissa's in favor of people starting in sophomore year. I think the peak time that she thinks pays off the most is the summer after sophomore year, before junior year. There's a lot of families who start earlier. I'm not sure if there's a point of diminishing return when you start too early, but anything you do ahead of time will help you ultimately get your best score, which should be theoretically in your junior year at some point. So part of it is learning the strategies that she talked about. Part of it is getting some of the content under your belt, but a lot of it is also just developing the stamina. The test prep, building the test prep muscle, just to be able to sit and focus for an hour at a time, take a quick break or no break, and then do another 45 minutes, and then a 15-minute break, and then 2 more sections. So that's a big part of it also. So even if you're starting before you know all of the stuff, so my son Harry is a junior, and he took a class last summer with Marissa. He attended most of those sessions, and then he took his first exam, I think in August maybe, or it could have been September. He wasn't anywhere near ready, and so his score wasn't as high as he is capable of getting, but he felt prepared, and he felt like he knew what was expected of him. He wasn't fatigued or anything like that. So that's the argument for starting on the early side. Even if you think you don't have time, find the time. And that could mean, this is something we talked about last night, that could mean leaving a volleyball practice early or something. Marissa just threw that out as a random example. She was like, I can't believe how much emphasis some kids put on volleyball, just to name a random activity, but she could have said anything. What was ironic about that was, like, literally an hour before, I was on the phone with a client of mine who is a volleyball player. She's studying abroad now. She's in Spain. Her dad is the head volleyball coach at a pretty big West Coast Division I volleyball powerhouse, and he's also the head coach of a national team of a big volleyball country. And she's not necessarily going to play at the Division I level. She might actually get some money as a scorekeeper, which was a very interesting thing that I never even contemplated. She was told by one of her dad's fellow coaches that they're always looking for people who know how to keep score. So, fun fact. But anyway, but she, a lot of kids in Long Island and other parts of the country, they play sports, and the coaches, and by the way, that could also mean they could be in plays, and the directors of the plays the same way. They're so focused on making sure you don't skip anything. It's not fair to all the other players. I get all that, and I actually agree with all that. But at some point, if you have to make difficult choices, assuming you're not going to go pro in volleyball or whatever sport you're playing, or go on Broadway or in the movies or something. But even if you are, by the way, I still think you need to occasionally make decisions to leave a practice or a rehearsal early to squeeze in your test prep, because you will run out of time. You talk to virtually any parent and probably kid who's been through the college process, ask them if they felt like they had plenty of time to get everything done. I'd be shocked if any honest person said, yeah, we have plenty of time. For the most part, people feel like they're run out of time. So you've got to marshal your resources very, very carefully before they just, they dissipate. So that's very important. So, all right, so let me just pause my little mini soapbox lecture here. Let me see who else is joining us. Why, Ken, the word webinar is a little creepy. It's not creepy. It's modern, okay? Selling pants is creepy. Okay. Hello to Barb. Ken is back. Nice, Jim. All right, good. So I got a couple of Giddens on. That's great. Whatever. Okay, so let me go to some of these questions that I got last night, and Barbara, you were on this, so if you feel like there are any wit and wisdom you want to add, you're always welcome. Barbara from the great state of Maine. All right, so Lisa had asked, is it necessary to do the essay on the SAT now that it is optional? It is advisable to do it. even though it's the most or the least heavily weighted section, you should definitely do it, according to our tutor Marissa. And I guess the reason is because you want to take a shot at getting your best grade in every category, even if because colleges see it, they just don't really know what to do with it. She actually said something pretty funny last night, which I wasn't sure how to take, but she's like the most. I don't know if you guys have seen any other presentations with her, but she's like the most demure, like cat-loving librarian, mellow lady, and she said something like, I always tell my kids to lie on when they're writing essays. I'm like, what? Like alternative essay facts? And she said, well, they ask you to take a position and support it, but they're not grading you on whether your facts are accurate or not. So feel free to support your arguments with either statistics or other points that you may not really know if they're true or not. so I thought that was hilarious, and we got a couple of questions about that also. All right, another question we got was what I guess I just covered this. What do you recommend for sophomores in high school? And that is take a diagnostic, figure out which test is best. By the way, we are running a free diagnostic in our office on Sunday morning, 8:30 a.m. Glenwood Landing. And that is a combo, a couple of sections of the SAT, a couple of sections of the ACT, just to get a feel for which one you'll do better on. So we have 10 spots. Anyone who's interested, private message me. I already sent out an email blast to my list, and the first come, first served. Okay. Do many colleges use the SAT Super Score, where they take the best score from multiple tests? The answer is that many, not all, but many do that. And the ones that tend not to do that are typically the more elite Ivy League and other types of schools. But even if that's the case, don't fret, because a lot of times they're just looking for that outlier, that fluke. So if you have a 35 on your best test, but you had a few others that were like in the high 20s, that might be a little bit of an outlier. But if you're in the mid 30s and bumping up gradually, or up and down, but your best test is a 35, but you have a 33 and a 31 or something, that's okay, because let's face it, that's what you do in college. You get a bunch of material down and you perform on a test. So colleges want to see your ability to perform well on these standardized tests. We got another question last night also that was about whether, it's about test optional schools and whether these tests, the SAT and ACT were going to go away at some point. They were kind of hoping that. My feeling is that they're never going to go away. I think they're going to continue evolving. But the reason I think they're not going away is really because I think it's very hard for admissions officers in general to get a feel for how well a kid can perform academically, mainly because of the rampant grade inflation in high schools. Like the most commonly given grade in high school is an A. It seems like everyone's got like a 93 to a 96 average that I meet with. And frankly, in college too, it's the most heavily given grade, commonly given grade also. So it's becoming harder. You can't really tell from recommendations so much, because it's very hard to get a bad recommendation. They're all glowing, So there are very few ways left to get a feel for how well a kid is going to do in college. Besides these standardized tests, they're not perfect, they're not fair, but I'm not sure what's better. Except for one of the best predictors of how well you do in college is whether your parents went to college, how much money they make, and other things that really are not too fair. Okay, let me rattle off a few more of these things before I pause for a few more coaching questions. Why won't Harvard superscore? Do all Ivy Leagues not superscore? Yeah, Harvard doesn't superscore because they can decide to do whatever the hell they want. So that is very helpful. You're welcome. It was a free webinar. It was a free non-refundable webinar last night, so I felt I had license to answer those questions. Okay. If a student has scored a 32 on the first ACT and a 1460 on the SAT, should they take both tests again or focus on one particular test? I think we agree that the 1460 was probably a little higher. If the scores are about the same, then it comes down to which one feels better for you. But if you're doing a lot better on one test, Marissa thinks, and I think, you should probably just focus on that one, barring any type of weird circumstance that happened, which she also talked about last night. Like you could be taking a test and like the craziest things could happen. She told a couple quick anecdotes. One one kid took an SAT or an ACT, and the marching band was practicing outside the window. Another one reported that their proctor was, up at the front watching YouTube videos with the volume up, no headphones. And then my favorite one is the story about a client of ours out in Iowa who took the ACT a couple months ago, and the kid vomited next to her. And they share these long tables in the test center that she was at. So, fun stuff. And of course, the proctor didn't know what to do, so it sat there for an awkwardly long period of time. All right. Another question. This came from Rochelle. Do you recommend those email SAT or ACT questions of the day? And Marissa said they're better than nothing, but they're not going to be that valuable. But at least they get your brain, going a little bit. So no downside to those if they're accurate questions. Here's a good one. Nita asked, are there any suggestions for test anxiety? And I, of course, interpret that to mean, do you want suggestions to become more anxious on the test? No, I assumed she meant to combat test anxiety. And what Marissa said was, that what that really comes down to, there's no magic wand. It's just drilling and practicing, but under timed conditions. So don't take a practice test at the house where you're FaceTiming your friends, or you're watching Netflix, or something, snapping on that Snapchat thing, gramming on that the Finstagram, and whatever you crazy kids do. You've got to simulate game day conditions and simulate the stress as best you can, and do it a lot, and then ultimately you'll feel more confident and more relaxed because you've been through simulated test day conditions enough. And that's why we offer, and we're continuing to offer, a bunch of timed proctored tests in our office all the way through the summer, it looks like. All right, let me pause. Hello to Laura Peterson making her coffee. Nice. Jim Giddens' true story, told by the women's volleyball coach at the school where my sister played, twin sister Joanna Lafayette, that she could get me into that school if I would be the women's volleyball scorekeeper. That is hilarious. I assume you opted to continue to be on the baseball team at Lehigh instead of that, but I think you would have been a fine scorekeeper. Wasn't Johnny Most, daughter or something, our scorekeeper on the basketball team? Johnny Most, the legendary Boston sportscaster, and she had a thing for Eddie O'Brien. It's like we're the only ones, having a conversation here. Hello to Pearl Chisner Lockwood. Welcome. Yes, Pearl was out power walking with her friend Mary. Good information for anyone here. All right, Laura, what about sending test scores to colleges during the quote-unquote free, funny, option, because you pay it's free because, I think this is what you mean, it's free because you pay for the test, and then you get free sending, free, you can send it to 3 schools or something. I kind of mixed feelings about that. I wouldn't do it, I guess. Okay, we got Eileen who says, is an online SAT prep course beneficial? Yeah, that was a question we got last night. Also, I think they can be. They really can be. What it really comes down to is if you have a kid who's going to do the work and motivated enough and doesn't necessarily strongly need the accountability component of it, then they can be great. So Khan Academy and all these other places that have free or very low cost, those are great. And for the most part, the content isn't a hell of a lot of different. Although my Marissa, our tutor, would probably have an issue with me saying that, but I don't think the content is really that much different. I think the rapport with the instructor, and I think the accountability is a big deal, and that's why people frankly pay more for the offline and one-on-one, like the classes and the one-on-one tutoring that we offer. I don't think it's necessarily so much that the content is a world of difference. I think it's really more about the personal one-on-one or small group stuff. Okay. All right, I'm just reading some questions that we got last night on our webinar about ACT and SAT prep. Which test is best? If you're just joining us, please fire away your questions in the comment section. Hello to Jeff Guzzi, another Newton North graduate, Newton North High School, Massachusetts. Jim and Jeff. That's always nice. Okay, go Tigers. Okay. If you plan to take this is from Nita again last night. If you plan to take the ACT 3 times, is it crazy to spend your prep time only on one section at a time and then super score? I don't think Marissa thought that was crazy, but she was like, "What are you talking about?" It was something she never heard about. I don't think that makes sense because there's a lot of variables involved. You're not really sure if you're going to do the best, on the one you study for. So study for everything. She said equally. So don't do that. Danielle, in the math section on either test, are all the problems worth the same amount? The answer is yes. Harder problems count just as much as easier problems, so don't just focus on hard problems first, then do the easy ones. That might be the opposite tactic to take because you want to pick up the low-hanging fruit first, do the easy ones, if anything, and make sure you have enough time for that. Joanne said, my daughter hit her target SAT score in the first attempt. Is it worth taking it again? Marissa and I both were musing about shouldn't she be raising her target? Because it sounds like her target was too low. She hit it her first time. It's very unusual to do that. It's possible. We have a client who took a practice test with us last year and he got a 36. And Marissa was like, yeah, I don't know if I can really, in good faith, offer him my services to tutor him. And I said, of course you can. It could have been a fluke. No, so then he took the test on his own without studying, without prepping for it, and he got 35. And I'm like, see, but it didn't really matter. There's not much of a impact on admissions of a 35 versus a 36. So, but barring that, usually you can improve your scores. All right. Lena said, do you have to take both tests? No, you don't unless, I think there's some really competitive schools, I believe MIT might be one of them, that does want you to take more than one test, but for the most part colleges take either or, so whatever you're doing the best on. Alexa said, on which test should you skip a question rather than guess, and which will you be penalized less for? None. You're not penalized for guessing. You're not penalized for wrong answers. You shouldn't do that. All right. What else is coming up here? Tiger Pride from Jim. Okay. Barbara, I would do anything Marissa tells me. That's so funny. We're working with, like, anything or just about test prep? We are working with her now through Skype, and Faith has gotten so much from it as opposed to Con and school prep. Well, that's good to know. Okay, so let's keep our fingers crossed, but I hear that all the time, so I'm not really worried about it at all. I think that's great. And Faith's doing her work too, so it's it's a two-way street. That's sometimes a lot of parents and kids forget about that. And that was actually something we talked about last night too. I remember, which was about sometimes kids take a test and they do well on it, and they take it again, they don't do as well. They get a lower score, and they're like, "Well, what happened? It must have been the tutoring or the classes or something." Sometimes it's that kids didn't prepare enough. They kind of lost that that prep mojo. They weren't really into it. Or there could have been other factors that are out of their control, or sometimes it's luck, But it's definitely a two-way street, and that's another question we got too. We were talking about, someone asked a question about, do you recommend Princeton Review, and for me, Princeton Review and Kaplan and all the other ones, all the other big box, big companies, Huntington Review. I feel like those are quality companies, but they're very hit or miss. And their process for hiring people is less about the person's ability to teach and necessarily perform on a test. It's more about whether they can fit into those companies' systems. So the quality of instruction really varies. And I remember the last couple of years, I haven't heard anything about this year, but at our high school, I think Kaplan was there, I would constantly hear about kids showing up for class and the instructor wasn't there. Like, it was a kid who just graduated college and he just flaked out or something. So that's kind of extreme. Marissa told me that her first job as a tutor back in the 90s, she was hired by Kaplan over the phone. They didn't really care about anything about her other than that she had an undergraduate degree and a law school degree. So it's not good or bad. It's just it's more about hiring, getting into their system, which is kind of lowest common denominator. It's not necessarily personalized, as opposed to Marissa and other dedicated full-time tutors, and that's all she does. She kind of eats, breathes, and sleeps tutoring. She doesn't have any other side gigs. She's really dedicated to it, and she's been doing it 15 years. And there's a handful of tutors out there like that. They charge more, but I think in general the results are a lot better. Okay. Laura, my sophomore is a cheerleader and volunteers coaching youth cheerleading clinics and teams. That's cool. Are her extracurriculars focused on cheerleading as well? All of them focus on cheerleading as well. Tumbling. Should she branch out and include other activities in order to stand out on college applications? So we'll switch gears for that because I actually think that's a great question. I get stuff like that all the time. Not really about tumbling necessarily. Jim Giddens used to do a lot of tumbling back in high school, actually. So it's very, very appropriate. Usually after a couple of beers. But anyway, so the answer is there is kind of a myth of the well-rounded student that used to be the case when we were all growing up in the in the 80s. Colleges wanted the well-rounded kid. Now it seems like they want specialists, or that's sort of the prevailing thought. So it's not a bad thing to focus heavily like she's doing. I think that's actually great. It shows a depth that's important. That being said, yeah, it's good not to be one-dimensional. So I don't think you necessarily have to go super deep in more than one area, but I do think rounding yourself out and doing other types of things is probably arguably good for college purposes, but beyond that, which I think is actually more important, ironically enough, as a college guy, I think she'd be a lot better served to develop some other interests and engage in them to the extent that she has time and try to squeeze it in. So, I don't know specifically what you're talking about, but it will certainly be valuable probably for college purposes, but definitely for the bigger picture, for life purposes. Okay. Jim, very active today. It's nice. Nice that your thumbs are getting a workout. At least party is working out, buddy. Know what I'm saying? Okay. So, I know you're laughing. I think that's funny. So, okay. A couple more questions here. Lena said, which test is easier, ACT versus SAT? And that, of course, is a loaded question because it is, it depends on the kid. Some of the distinctions to think about, so you can answer this yourself, are that the ACT is a faster test, more questions per hour than the SAT. So if you're a slow reader, the ACT may not be so great. The math on the ACT is a little bit easier than on the SAT, apparently. And the ACT has a science section, but it's not really purely science. It's a combination of some science-y stuff, that should be a word, and it's also a lot of charts and reading and critical reading type stuff. So don't be deterred from taking an ACT if you're like, oh, I'm not good at science. It's not. It's okay. So that should help, but we can't answer which test is easier. And then Lena asked, what's the difference between the SAT and ACT? So I just answered that one. Which test is the reading section easier on? Lisa asked that question, and I don't think that the one is easier than the other. But like Marissa said, the ACT is faster, so it may not be harder, but it might be, I guess indirectly might be harder if you're not a fast reader. Okay, what do we got here? Lena asked, what about Princeton prep classes? Yeah, so I answered that a little bit already. Hit or miss. I think they're a great company. I think they are a lot different than when they were smaller. I mean, that's what happens. You start off small like us, we can control quality. It's very easy to control quality because we basically have 2 tutors and some other sort of people who kind of string for us. But as you grow into a big company and you start developing systems, the biggest challenge is recruiting top talent, and it's not possible to do that. You can do it, but it's hit or miss. So in general, I favor, no matter whatever part of the country you're in, I favor either the individual tutors who have good reputations, but they might be a little pricier than going to classes, or the small-ish businesses like us, but there's probably thousands of businesses like us who have tutors, but they're more tightly controlled. They're not really a system, not really you're not plugging someone into a machine to teach. That's just my prejudice. I've seen everything. Oh, and someone asked what time. Okay, so we promoted some classes for people that are local, and you can, let me just put that up here. You can read about that. Lena was asking that. You can read about that at on our website, Lockwood Test Prep. And you just click on classes. You'll see that we're offering $100 off if you sign up in the next couple of days, and the schedule is right there. We've got an SAT, sort of a cram type of class coming up, and we have an ACT class coming up. You know, these tests now, this is the time to, if you're a junior, to focus on getting your best test results. Marissa said something like, virtually any month they're offered is good, except June tends to be not the best month because that's when a lot of kids are taking finals and maybe AP exams, and they're just very busy. So other than that, there are a few other bites at the apple now that are new compared to last year. I think the ACT is now offered in July, and the SAT is now offered in August. So if you have a junior now, I would look at those as your last opportunities to really do well without pressure. But I would try to take it once, or whatever test you're focusing on, try to take it once or twice before the summer, and then put it to bed. Be done then. And if you have a sophomore, then the best time to start your test prep, in our opinion, is the summer in between sophomore and junior year. A lot of companies love to put you on like a 3-year plan. And actually, Marissa, she was telling me a story, telling us a story in the webinar last night, that she was being interviewed by one of the big companies, and she said something like, with my private clients, I like to get them the highest scores possible in the shortest amount of time, because I think it's better for business. I'll get more referrals that way instead of dragging out and charging. And she was literally told by the person hiring her, "Oh no, we don't do that. We want to sign people up, for a minimum of, whatever it is, 40 hours of test prep or something." Some people need that, but not everyone does. And Marissa and the best tutors in general are all about the greatest results in the least amount of time. And she has the luxury of doing that because there's only so many hours a day she can tutor, and she gets booked up really quickly. So, for every person that she graduates from her classes, there's probably 2 or 3 people waiting in line, to be able to take those spots. So that's why we're offering these classes that she's teaching, which we just started last summer for the first time, and they're a little bit more, cost efficient, and a nice way to dip your toe in the water. So if you want information on that or any information, go to Lockwood Test Prep. Let me just wrap up here with a couple of questions. Laura, back to test taking. Marissa sounds awesome. Can she come to the Midwest? No. If not, how do we find someone like her locally? How to verify? Yeah, that's very hard. So first of all, Marissa does a lot of stuff by Skype. We have clients in the Midwest and the West Coast, and I think we have one in Nebraska. I guess that's Midwest. But if you're not comfortable with Skype, by the way, usually kids have no problem because they're used to it, but we parents may not be comfortable with Skype. But if you're not, then I think you have to ask around. I don't think there's any substitute for word of mouth, and find out. It's a weird thing, by the way, because sometimes the kids who do the best on the tests, the parents don't want to admit that the kids worked with someone, or if kids are currently working with a great tutor, they don't want to necessarily share because it's like a weird competitive thing. It's a very interesting business. Like somehow, like if a kid does really well, that means that no one else can. Like they're competing with someone else in their school. That's just not the way it works. I no matter what I say, people don't believe that, but that's not coming from me. That's coming from people like my friend and mentor, Don Betterton, who's on the admissions committee at Princeton for 30 years and director of financial aid for 30 years. And I've asked him that probably 5 or 6 times over the years, and he insists, there's no quota from any high school. So anyway, let me talk about a couple other things. Unless you guys have questions here, we got another 8 minutes here. So I got a few more questions that are fresh in my mind from the workshop that I did in New York City at the Manhattan Youth Council a couple of nights ago on a really crappy weather night. I got a couple of questions about the 529 college savings plan, whether it's good or bad, which is a very popular question, so let me just go over that really quickly again. The question about the 529 is not whether it counts against you or not, it's how much, because it does penalize you in the financial aid formulas. If you're going to qualify for need-based aid, a lot of people, particularly in the city, New York City, don't qualify for need-based aid because their income is too high. I had someone come up to me and say, I make $350,000 and I'm poor in New York City because things are so expensive. Well, unfortunately, because the financial aid rules are not really fact-based or reality-based, I should say, they don't factor in things like living expenses. So that's a guy who's not going to qualify for need-based aid under really any circumstances that I can think of. And the 529 for him, it doesn't matter if it penalizes you because it's got tax. It's not going to matter because your income is too high. So there's really no penalty, meaningful penalty for him. And it's a great vehicle to save for college because of the tax benefits. The earnings grow, I guess tax-free, and you can pull out the money tax-free. But for some people whose income, and there's no magic bright line, by the way, but if you're making, in the low $100,000 mark and you're applying to private schools, you can qualify for need-based aid. Then where you have your money saved can be an issue, and in that case, the 529 will penalize you either 5% of the amount that you have saved. So if you have $100,000 saved, it could penalize you $5,000 per year of a loss in eligibility. Or for some schools, it might be $20,000. It really depends on the schools, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. So I'm not saying the 529 is friend or foe. I'm because I talk like that. I am saying that you have to be. For some families it's great. For a lot of families, not so great. I got another question. We were talking about how much do grades and scores count, because that's one of the things that I talk about in my presentations. That it's not really getting into college is not really a meritocracy. It's not just based on academics and whether you can do the work. At a competitive school, roughly 60% of the equation is about your GPA, the ACT or SAT scores, and the rigor, the amount of advanced IB or AP type classes that you've taken. That might be 60%. The other 40% of the equation, some stuff is in your control, some is not in your control. Race and ethnicity and where you live, out of your control, but that factors in. Like it or not, politically correct or not correct, that's just the way it is. Don't shoot the messenger. I have no, just trying to be neutral here. Just giving you the facts on the Joe Friday of college planning. And then there's other stuff like your extracurricular activities, which we had a couple of questions about. There's typical things that people do, like join clubs, and there's atypical things that people do, like found clubs. It's great to be in National Honor Society, but honest to God, that's a participation trophy type of, there's more kids in that than not in that at any given high school. It's not so meaningful to be in National Honor Society. So you've got to do more than just the same stuff that everyone else is doing. I give whole presentations on that, so I have to wrap up here, but I just wanted to introduce that concept to you. Whether your parents went to that school, if you're a legacy, that's that's a big deal at many, not all, but many colleges. If you're a recruited athlete, like Jimmy was for women's volleyball, that's very important. It can be, if you're a low-income family, that can also be a big factor. If you're a very high-income, affluent family, by contrast, you might be what's called a development case, which has nothing to do with learning development. It has to do with developing you into a donor to the college. That's a big deal, which is how Jimmy got into his sister's school as a volleyball scorekeeper. Okay, now you know I'm just lying. Any credibility I had was just shredded. Okay, so let me wrap up here with some a couple more questions that came in. Barb, when would be a good time? Okay, great question, actually. I mean, all of your questions are great. When would be the best time to forward test scores to colleges? Yeah, I think I would let the dust settle until you've hit your best, still faith, and your son or your daughters have hit their best scores. I wouldn't, there's no rule of thumb. It's basically, it could be simultaneously with when you send in your applications. By the way, sometimes, and this is just something to think about for next, when the applications are due. The earliest application due date is October 15th. A lot of them are in November and afterward. But what a lot of high schools and what the College Board and the ACT Board sometimes say is send your scores 2 to 3 weeks before your deadline. Why? I have no idea. Somehow it takes a long time to send an email or to send something automatically to a school. So don't send it any later than 3 weeks prior to a deadline, just in case a college will fail to consider you early action, early decision if you don't have everything in, including your test scores. It usually doesn't happen, but I just see that all the time. And Barb's question that was a trigger question for me that brought up a memory. So thanks, Barb. You always bring out the best in me. Ann Arnold, can you talk about 9th grade PSA Tours indicators? Is it realistic to think students can improve from there? Not only is it realistic, it is almost a given, because no way have you gotten anywhere near the content you need to do really well on the PSAT. So 9th grade is super early to take it. I have heard of people doing that. Actually, when I was talking to Marissa last night, she mentioned that she took the PSAT in 6th grade. I was like, that is so freaky. but I guess it's not. She's in a whole another echelon of like a secret society of test takers. So clearly, I didn't get that invitation. I didn't see her at the last Mensa meeting either, probably because I have no idea when or where they meet. Anyhow, you will continue to go up as you, both because of the content that you haven't had yet in 9th grade, as well as practicing. So 100% you will go up. I think Marissa said something like when she took it in 6th grade, she got like a 900. I think it was 2 parts. When she took it, and she's like, she gets perfect scores now. So obviously, she's a little bit different because she's a professional, but you can go way, way up, and that's unbelievable that you took it in 9th grade. Or your son or daughter did. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so I am going to wrap up. Last call for questions for free college coaching. Please share, comment, emoticon, emoji, whatever they're called. Get notified, when we come on. We do this every Friday at 9 o'clock, except today it was 9:15. And it's all about giving away, just firing away any questions you have about college stuff. We didn't talk about negotiating offers yet. I'm starting to do a lot of that right now. More offers are trickling in for seniors, and any way that I can help. This is the freebie that I do. I am substantially out of the free one-on-one consulting business, except for people who've gone to webinars or workshops I've never spoken before. But I did so many one-on-one freebies last year. It sucked a lot of time and energy out of me. So I made the difficult decision to walk away from my very lucrative free advice business last year. But instead, what I'm doing this year are these free hour of college coaching. Every Friday, 9 a.m., you're welcome to drop by either live or in replay. And Pearl and I also do College Talk Tuesday, every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's a different format. That's sort of like a news show. Here's what you should be doing now. And we're just kind of, talking about what's happening. Fridays are about your questions, whatever you want to talk about. That's the difference. All right? Thanks for watching, and except Jimmy. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you soon. If you have any questions about anything I talked about that you don't feel comfortable talking about over the interwebs like this in public, then shoot me a private message. And I've been trying to get better about getting back to people in a more punctual, timely manner. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.